The year is 2022. A 43-year-old Jeff Keighley is standing on the stage at the current year's Game Awards ceremony, announcing that the game of the year is Elden Ring. The developers come up, and shortly after their speech ends, a man from the back of the group comes forward and says this.
Hey, Matan. Real quick, I want to thank everybody and say that I think I want to nominate this award to my Reformed Orthodox Rabbi, Bill Clinton. Thank you, everybody.
He is quickly ushered off the stage, and the show ends. This incident was pretty weird, but what if I told you it was still on par with some of the weirdest things to happen at the event over the years, including those that were scripted or planned? So, you may be wondering, as I'm sure Jeff was as well, how on earth did we get here? The Game Awards is a long-standing, often joked about, yet still regarded with some respect, tradition in the gaming sphere. Despite even statements from Jeff Keighley himself saying that the event has only been going on for 10 years.
Tonight is our 10th TGA, a global celebration of video games, and boy, do we have a show for you.
The show has a much longer and involved history than that, dating back to before Jeff himself was legally an adult. Let's explore the long and storied history of gaming's first and most celebrated awards show. Let's start in 1979.
Hell of a year! China invades Vietnam. The Muppet Movie. Love that film. Margaret Thatcher.
And most importantly to our story, Jeff Keighley is born in the suburbs of Toronto to two loving parents. Parents who were both executives at IMAX.
Hi, I'm David Keighley.
And I'm Patricia Keighley, and we're the chief quality gurus here at IMAX.
Giving them access to membership for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts. This meant young Jeff would be able to attend, and gain a fondness for, the Oscars. Another formative aspect of Another formative aspect of Keighley's childhood was ample access to a computer, which was far less commonplace than it would be in near decades. This resource led Jeff to gain an affinity and love for video games and computing in general. In an interview with Game Informer in 2018, Jeff said, quote, "My first experiences with games started when I was a kid. I remember my mother, who ran the books for my dad's business in Toronto, always had an IBM PC in their office. When I was 5 years old, instead of going to piano lessons or anything like that, I went to computer classes. From there, it grew into playing some of the early adventure games. I remember Willow from Lucasfilm, and early Sierra Arts games on the IBM PC in the family room. My brother and I would sit there and play games. We got consoles from Sega to Nintendo." Unquote. Over these childhood years, Keighley would learn lots of important skills as well as play many important games. As the 80s crawled into the early 90s, Jeff began to grow into a preteen, where his curiosity about those adventure games that he played was piqued. Being the inquisitive young man that he was, he wrote a letter to Sierra Online to ask about the process of making their games. To everyone's shock, most of all his own, Jeff received a letter back. Not only was it a reply, but an offer to playtest a new game that they were working on. The game would be EcoQuest 2. After a bit of back and forth, Sierra would give Jeff a demo copy of the game. He played it, gave feedback, and got to correspond via forums with many big names at the studio who were also testing the game. Keighley was starstruck and took his first taste of encouragement to become a games journalist. This relationship between Sierra Online and the teenage Keighley would continue, and with it, he gained a reputation through his postings about the early demos he received as a well-written kid who knew what he was talking about in the field of adventure games. This reputation would lead to him being noticed by one of the editors from a gaming magazine that he read, who would, in turn, point him in the direction of id Software in 1993 during the last stretch of Doom's development, to write a report on it. This would snowball into other small tales of success for him. With his continued success, Keighley not only knew what he wanted to be, but how. His path as a games journalist was becoming clearer and clearer. In 1994, a friend of Jeff's father working at TBS would conceive of the very first Game Awards show, called Cybermaina 94.
Hey gamers! Cybermania 94, the ultimate Gamer Awards.
And Double Dragon,
The Ultimate Gamer Movie.
want you to win.
Yes!
Go to any Sam Goody or Musicland store.
What are you waiting for?
Get your official game piece.
Cool.
Watch Cybermaina 94.
Very cool.
The Ultimate Gamer Awards on TBS.
Whoa!
You could win one of these great prizes.
Awesome.
Then don't miss Double Dragon from Gramercy Pictures.
Cool movie. Wow. Dare to duel the dragon and win.
He would hire Keighley as a host and to write some of the segments featuring celebrity guests. For the 14-year-old Jeff, this would be a gateway into getting seen as a professional in the industry, opening up similar doors for him in the future. Unfortunately, for general audiences, it was a flop. Overall, it felt like it was less of a celebration of what games had become and more of a mockery of that. Though I do recommend watching it if you get the chance. It's a very fun oddity with hindsight. From the eclectic collection of 90s celebrities to a weirdly long musical performance that you wish would have been over a minute shorter than it actually was, it's not very hard to see the seeds of what the Game Awards would become. Speaking of seeds, Cybermania 94 would also plant a seed in the mind of Jeff Keighley, who would return to the idea of a gaming awards show backed by the broadcasters SpikeTV, with their event creatively titled the SpikeTV VGAs Awards in 2003. This iteration of the show would last for 10 years, and over that time it would grow more and more ridiculed and disliked each ceremony. Many executive blunders were made each year, such as a Hottest Video Game Vixens category that was seen as very unserious and silly at the time, but now sticks out as a relic dating the ceremony in the worst way possible. All told, there's not much innovation to talk about in these 10 years, more than just small iterations on the already existing format, but it is important to note that this 10 years of shows would get us started off on the wrong foot with the modern Game Awards' reputation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How did this era end? Well, all this criticism would come to a head in 2013 when SpikeTV wanted to pivot their branding away from more seemingly masculine programming, and the Game Awards became a victim of this change. They wanted the show shortened and entirely reworked. That sounds great on paper. They're gonna give the show more of a celebratory feel and address the concerns of the gaming populace, right? Well, not really. In fairness, the actual content of the 2013 show is pretty interesting, with developer interviews and a good amount of releases announced. Plus, they streamed the show live on the internet for the first time. However, there were plenty of problems, the most glaring of which being that Spike didn't even televise it in its original form. They took the stream from the day of the event, cut it down to only an hour long, and showed that instead. Not to mention the other major changes, like overshadowing Jeff Keighley with celebrity host Joel McHale, and changing the name from the VGAs to simply VGX, a stunt that I and many others feel further served to degrade and delude what was supposed to be an equivalent to the Oscars for video games. The following year, in 2014, Spike reportedly had very little interest in doing the show again after the reception of their rework went so poorly. Despite this, they still offered to continue working with Keighley and the rest of the VGAs crew, but they declined after seeing how the show could work as a live-streamed event online. Following their departure, the VGAs would partner with the big three gaming companies, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo, to fund the solo venture known as the Game Awards, dropping video from the title entirely. This is where most consider the ceremony to have truly begun. The show was very well received and remarked with a 65% increase in viewership over the previous year's show. Everyone was anxious to see what this new era of the Game Awards had to offer. I argue that, while technically true that the Game Awards didn't come about until 2014, the legacy stands in all but name. This is evidenced in following year's shows as the problem of the past began to creep their way back in, tainting the event with many famous guests and lengthy unrelated musical performances and the occasional mistreatment of a developer or game franchise. For the time being, though, the show was well received, most seeing it as a clean slate for the newly named TGAs. Side note, TGAs is kind of redundant because it's the Game Awards. And so if you say the TGAs, it's the Game Awards. Whatever, back to the script. This gave Jeff and the team lots of leeway to fix the problems of the past and allowed them to go mostly uncriticized for repeat mistakes from the SpikeTV era. But in recent years, the Game Awards are suffering from the usual problems and are under more fire from it than ever before. So what caused this? Well, mostly viewers taking notice in the decline and poor decisions being made. But I believe that the reason most people are so ready to call out this year's show is because of the Bill Clinton kid incident mentioned at the top of the video. It led people to realize even more than before that the production value of this show had been slipping. Couple that with choosing to do things like add a 30-second countdown to all acceptance speeches while celebrities were allowed to go on for several minutes, and just generally rushing through to get to the reveal trailer for the next samey-looking extraction shooter that won't even be out for the next 3 years, and you've got a recipe for bad press. Though it isn't all bad, the current era is in the same position as the SpikeTV VGAs were a decade ago. Except in this case, they aren't doing nearly as poorly in both numbers or audience reception, not to mention that the TGAs are independent, and no worse for wear, meaning that they have time to learn from these mistakes and improve in the future without the fear of a network shutting them down. Which begs the question, what does the future hold for the first and finest gaming awards ceremony? Personally, I think it could go either way. But if we look at the man behind it all, Jeff Keighley, he seems like he really does care, and that most of the poor decisions made were made out of ignorance, not malice, and plain misguided judgment. He seems like he knows and appreciates how important to the games industry having something like the Game Awards is, as a solid, structured way to recognize the good in video games, especially since games journalism has become such a negative place over time. I believe that he will take in these criticisms, as they continue to get louder, and the show will improve despite the possibility that it might only get worse. As I've mentioned, even in light of its rough history and current mistakes, the Game Awards are important. Gaming without the TGAs would be like film without the Oscars, theater without the Tonys, or my video scripts without run-on sentences. It simply would be a worse place for it. It is interesting, though, to have watched the TGAs evolve from Cybermaina 94 to SpikeTV's Video Game Awards, and now to just the Game Awards. As much as things have changed, they have stayed equal parts the same. We've talked about the past, present, and future of the show, and even if it were to end this year, there have still been more than 30 years of awards given and a massive impact made. Thank you for joining me and celebrating the history of the Video Game Awards. But what do you think? Do you love the Video Game Awards? Do you hate them? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always happy to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button and maybe subscribe to see what the new year brings. I'm also live on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so go check me out there. All sources for this video are listed in the description. I've been Voxel64, and I'll see you next month.